Yeah.
And just kind of rolling with the punches. Before we even came on, I was dealing with electronic issues because this week my cat threw up into my modem and fried it. So, and I kind of forgot about that whole thing until I went to jump on and I didn't have internet. So we are hot spotting today.
Yes.
And
yes. Yeah. We're dealing with vomit in modems anyway. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess that like for this first episode, I was looking for somebody who I can just have a casual conversation with as like that I am naturally talking to all the time. And you're one of those people that I'm just naturally talking to all the time. You've become,
it's true.
Yeah, you've become one of my go-to. I'm just going to vox Audrey about this and see what Audrey
which I love. And I'm like, I'm just going to Fox Brooke about this. And then it's going to take some weird left turn and it's going to be super nourishing for everybody involved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, I don't know, like just talking about like why I wanted to start this podcast, how things are different. And then through that, things that are going on for you too. Because basically what sparked all of this is that, I mean, always like I've been podcasting for a long time and I've always been very frustrated by like the kind of content that is like, we're going to tell you exactly how to do a thing and then act like it's easy. Just gonna act like it's real simple. All you have to do is this, and ignoring all of the other things that are going on for most people who run businesses. Like, I don't know, having lives, not fucking wanting to do the thing that you just told them is easy to do, not having the capacity to do the thing that you just told them is easy to do, for whatever reason, not having a business where that actually works for them, like whatever. And what I started thinking about was, this new platform that I'm putting together, how I could create something that was a part of that and that went along with it. Because originally I was just going to change the name of my old podcast and just be like, I'm just going to change the name and keep doing what I'm doing. And then I was like, oh no, that's not actually what I want to do. Because what I actually want to do is I want people who are part of that community space that I'm opening to be able to ask questions and then be like, I don't know the answer to that, because guess what? We don't all know all of the answers, which is another thing that I can't stand about like some of the podcasts that I find myself listening to and realized I was doing myself, where it's like, you put this pressure on yourself to think that you should know the answers to all the questions. And obviously you don't, but I know so many people who know the answers. So why not, if people are looking for podcasts to be on and ways to get in front of new audiences, why not like bring people together? Like, this person has a question, this person has an answer, you can ask it, then I'll put it on the podcast. Everyone benefits, but it's also not just me talking just for the sake of talking. And that was kind of what sparked me putting this together. And of course, the reason that you were, even though we did talk about how you were a last minute substitution, I'm not going to lie, I'm sorry. But you were going to be for the first episode, because I wanted to talk to you about your stuff. I wanted to talk to you about perfectionism. You're going to have to come back for that part.
I'll be back. Yeah.
But one of the reasons why I wanted to chat with you about it is because this is the stuff that you and I are talking about all the time. I feel like, where we're like, yeah, like you're supposed to just X, Y, and Z. And also like, what the fuck?
Totally. So one of the things I'm curious about, like for drawing things out for anybody who's listening right now, are like, what are some of the themes that have been popping up for you that you're excited to talk to people about?
Well, see, this is the thing. Good question. Because I think that what I'm realizing is I'm at a phase now where I can do things less because I'm excited about them and more because I know that they're genuinely helpful for people.
Right.
Which is like a new thing for me, because I started my original podcast being like, oh, this is a thing that I want to create and that I'm really excited about. I mean, I am really excited about this, but also like, I genuinely am curious about like, what are the questions that you wish someone was actually answering? And like, I probably know someone who can give you, who could have a more nuanced conversation with me about your specific situation, or who could fill in some of those details that you feel like you're not getting. And so, I mean, the theme of all of it is this, like, we can consume how-to content all we want, but at the end of the day, you can't actually just know all of the things to do and then just run down the list and do them all.
Yeah, totally.
Not possible.
Totally. Yeah.
So like, what do you do then? Given the complexity of like real world situations where you have multiple priorities, you know?
Yeah.
So anyways, I mean, yeah, I guess that going into this, I'm like, I'm excited to have the people here who I know are really smart and know some things, like answer the questions that people actually want answers to and do a lot less talking just for the sake of fucking creating content.
Yeah. I feel like that is one of the, I feel like that's a theme right now in my own life. And I think that's a theme that's kind of coming up in conversation is a feeling of creating content because it's something you're supposed to do or something that is now expected or something that feels like a necessary part of business. And the term creating content means so it's such a vague, overarching term. And I think with all the conversations with AI, right? Like that's like a whole other story. Like what are we actually, like what is being created? What are we actually talking about? Are we creating content? I'm putting all these things in quotes because yeah, what is creating content actually? Like is it just stuff that you feel like you got to throw out into the world because that's what we're supposed to be doing to keep ourselves in front of people? Are we creating things because it actually is, like you're talking about, answering a question that somebody has and is looking for an answer to something? Are we creating because we are excited about something, just like you were talking about previously with your podcast, where you're like, oh, I'm creating because I'm actually excited about this thing. This concept of creating content is a with this invention with AI, now you can create so much content so much easier. And it's like, is that actually, we are not. So I think we are in a period of time that practicing discernment is going to be a really, really important skill. And I don't think that a lot of folks really have thought about it or practice it or like know how to use it.
Yeah. Okay. Already I'm like, okay, there's 17 things that I want to talk to you about. Everyone, this is why I wanted Audrey here for this, because I already knew. It's like, we don't even need to know what we're talking about. We'll just talk. The first thing is, yes, this concept of creating content. And it's so, even when you said that back to me, you're like, creating content, I was like, ugh, because it's become this concept that it's so interesting because it's almost like one of those things where like, if you aim directly at creating really great content, you're not gonna.
Yes.
Like, if you're creating content for the sake of creating content, you're actually not focusing on the thing that you should be focusing on, which is creating something beautiful, useful, helpful, whatever it is, whatever your reason for creating is, and then putting that out there. That is whatever it is that you're creating and sharing with people, that is content. But we have forgotten about that because we're so obsessed with doing it the right way. But the other thing in this is, this feels so relevant for conversations that you and I have been having about your work.
Yeah.
Because you just had this, like, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about it here, but like, you just also had this kind of like epiphany about writing your book in a totally different way.
Yes.
And I'm like immediately sensing this like through line between what I'm talking about here. And what's interesting too, and this is like so, oh man, I'm so excited now because it's such a good indicator of the fact that like doing what both of us are doing right now could lead you to two completely different things. Like, I'm choosing to be like, I want to create a thing because I like, less because I'm excited to do it and more because I'm witnessing people are looking for certain information and I know people who have it and I could bring those people together and we could demystify this whole idea that there's like this one simple answer that you're just missing or that everyone has it figured out except for you. For you, I think that you're also completely flipping the idea of creating content on its head, but it's taking you to a much different place, which is like the point of why I want to be talking about all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And always full disclosure, this is my process. This does not have to be your process, but if hearing about my process is helpful, awesome. If you think it's stupid, that's cool too. So I've been writing a book for several years now. I actually had a book completely written. It was in the second round of edits. And my rough draft happened right before the pandemic. My first round of edits happened like right in the midst of it. And I stepped away from it for a while because I don't know, didn't seem like the most important thing to be doing at that time. when I came back to it and I was reading through it, I'm like, this is not interesting to me. This is centering all the wrong stuff. It was centering what the things that I was, and I think this happens a lot of times too. I know that you've talked about this, where we center the things we don't want. I'm centering the oppression, or I'm centering the white supremacy, or I'm centering the things that I am anti.
Yep.
But I'm actually not bringing to the forefront the things that I want people to be highlighting, paying attention to, and spending more time with. Right. And if we're talking about the nervous system, which is a lot of the stuff that I talk about and write about, is that's already become a challenge, is that a lot of the folks I work with, a lot of things I talk about, we start centering the stuff we don't want. We put a lot of energy there. We start orienting towards those things. Okay, well, if you're orienting towards all the stuff you don't want, how are you going to get to the stuff you do want? Right? It's like, what's your North Star? If you're staring at a black hole over here, I'm like gesturing at different sides of my body. If you can't see me, if I'm just, if I'm like staring down the black hole, how am I ever going to get to the sun? Like, I actually have to turn my head, look at the sun, and start orienting in that direction.
And that's what creativity is, by the way, I think. Like, it's like no longer focusing on all of the things that you're against, or that are wrong, or that you want to fix, and focusing on creating the thing that you do.
Yep.
Which is super fucking risky.
Right.
And scary.
Yeah, totally. And so I was like, okay, well, this isn't it. And so I started writing it again. And it again started centering. I got through 3/4 of the book second time around. And I was like, and at that point, I had done some like rearranging. I had trashed a bunch of stuff. I've kind of like trashed and burned and then like rewritten and sort of mashed back together this book in several different ways. And again, I was like, why am I talking about this? There's a lot of talk about work. There's a lot of talk about business. And to be honest, that's not the thing. That's not the conversation I want to have. Like, these things are part of people's lives, and they're big parts of people's lives. But that's not, again, it's not what I want to center. I don't want to be centering business or work. I don't think it's what the important thing is to center. So here we go, slash and burn. Here it goes again. And I just started thinking about like, what is the book that I want to make? Like, what's the experience I want to have making this book? Because that's a part of the process, right? Is like being able to enjoy the process. I know there's plenty of people who write books because they want to, they have a particular objective for it, right? It's marketing or it's whatever. But that's not my objective. Like, originally it was kind of like that, but at this point I'm like, that's not really what I care about. And I actually had a really interesting conversation with a woman by the name of Elizabeth Watkins Price. And she just wrote a book, and I was telling me about her process, and she was getting super jazzed. It's really fun to talk to like other writers who get it. Like, it's very, very exciting. And she was talking about having done something similar, where she's like, I wanted to like become the person to write the book that I wanted to write. And it was like a lot of memoir, but like the memoir was so vulnerable and raw that it ended up being like wrapped in a lot of my practices, which actually felt like a really compassionate thing to do. And like, even me talking about it right now, and like, she can talk about it obviously way better than I just did, but it like gave me chills. I was like, that's the process. Yes. Like, you go through the journey, like the writing itself does something to you and brings you to a place. And then you figure out how to wrap that in something that like does something for you, and then it does something for somebody else.
Yeah.
And like, that's the whole thing. It's like, if you're not creating for yourself or for somebody else or in relationship with, it's just like, what are we doing? Are we really just like throwing stuff against a wall because we've been told to throw something against the wall? So that's the very not linear process. So that's where I am now. And I've got a bunch of sticky notes. I've got all sorts of stuff up. And one of the parts of the book, that one of the sticky notes is actually about what we've been talking to a little bit here, is like concept versus reality, like us relating to a concept versus like relating to what's here.
Yeah.
There's something about relating to like what's here versus just like this, right? This concept of creating content. When I say creating content, I have no relationship to that term.
The cat has joined the conversation. When
everybody go onto YouTube and the cat has entered the chat.
Yeah. What's the cat's name? I forget. I feel terrible. What's the name?
Sweet pea.
Sweet pea, of course, duh. I just thought Sweet pea was about to like turn their little head and like talk into the microphone, just like
It may happen.
perfect.
It may happen.
Yeah, it's like this whole like, okay, well, if we're not doing something that like does something for us or does something for other people, we're not creating a thing that's like for, you know, for us or in that process, then what are we doing? It's like, that's where I think that what we're doing is we're trying to figure out how to do the thing that has been promised to deliver all of the money. I think is it's like, there's this promise that if you do all of the stuff the right way and you just create content in this way and whatever, then it's going to work. And work usually means make money. But what I see is that like people are aiming for that when that's not actually the reason why they're even here. Like, not to say that we don't want to make money. Of course we do. But really, like, you could just go and get a job if that's what you wanted to do. And sometimes people decide to do that. And that's great. And also, like, if that doesn't feel satisfying to you, then the reason that doesn't feel satisfying to you is because actually you're here for a different reason. And part of what I'm like, you know, constantly wrestling with, I feel like is this like making money is actually not that hard of a problem to solve. I mean, it is for some people, of course, and in certain circumstances, obviously, but what's the hard problem to solve is figuring out how to do what you actually want to do, create the thing that you actually want to create, fit that in with what you want your life to look like, and figure out how to make you money. Which is a much different thing from just going down the fucking checklist of all the shit that you're supposed to do. And I feel like no one's giving themselves enough credit for that. Like,
totally. Yeah. And so like the metaphor that just popped into my mind, it's like if you were to write a checklist on how to grow a plant, right? It's like you get the dirt, you plant the seeds, you water the seeds, you give it sunlight, whatever. But here's the thing. Weather happens, right? Weather is unpredictable. You may get the right weather. You may get the wrong weather. You don't really know. Are you growing it inside? Are you growing it outside? Like, are there animals that may come and eat those? Right. It's like there are so many circumstances and factors that play into a process that like none of these checklists happen in a vacuum.
Right. Exactly. Business doesn't happen in a vacuum. Business happens because people run businesses, and human beings, turns out, are kind of fucking complex.
Living in a kind of complex world, and
a little bit, just a little bit. So I'm just like endlessly fascinated by, and it makes sense, right? Because we're all drawn to this idea of things just being simple. So, and this is the other thing too, that I always try to like remind myself of is like, rather than just being angry about the kinds of conversations that are out there, the kinds of content that is out there, the ways that we're being told to approach a certain thing, remembering that the reason that exists is because on the other side of things, we're all out here looking for the easy answer. Like we're all out here looking for the simple, just give me the answer, just get to the point kind of thing. And so it's a tricky thing.
Yeah.
But I think that part of what I'm kind of craving, I guess, is almost this like this exposing like what is true and real here, which is that there's such an illusion of like there's people who know how to do things and who have everything figured out, and for those people things are just simple and easy and they know how to do the right things, and you are somehow broken, flawed, fucked up because despite the fact that you're consuming all of the stuff that those people are putting out there, it's not working for you, but it's working for everybody else. And I'm just like, but is it? Or is it just but is it?
And that's the thing, right? I think the thing is like, what we need to say is some people are making money, some people are not making money.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are putting up the front that they're making money, but they're
Mm-hmm.
not making money. Some people have jobs. Some people don't have jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have spouses or significant others. Some people have other sources of income, right? Like there are so many things happening in the background, and it is, and nobody talks about those things,
Mm-hmm.
which is like both fine, but then also very difficult for people who are trying to understand, like, because that's one of the things we do as humans, right? Is we look around at each other and say, like, am I where I'm supposed to be? Am I in the right group of people? Like, am I doing the right things? Like, am I in the right stage? Like, what's going on? And because there are a lot of these conversations that are not happening, we don't know. Like, we just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was having a conversation with somebody this morning. I asked this group, what's something that you want to learn more about? And somebody said, I just want to know what to do.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh. First of all, me too. All of us, this is what we're all looking for. And also what that really is a call for self-trust, because the idea that there is a what to do is the whole fucking thing. And like I feel like people might be listening to this and be like, okay, great. Except like, you know, just trusting myself isn't going to like get me out of this situation. Well, actually, I think it would. I actually think that it would, because like it's like, when you are looking for people to tell you how to do the thing all the time, and especially when you're looking to this kind of content that we're talking about, this whole conversation has ended up centering around this sort of content, that it's like
how to do
that
content.
kind of, which by the way, the next episode of this podcast is going to be very Q&A, and you're just getting answers. So, I mean, you know, but it's going to be to like specific questions. And I hope that there's some nuance in there that allows you to take what's helpful and leave what isn't.
Yep.
But it's like constantly looking for the give me the answer, constantly looking for the right person who's going to finally give you the thing that's going to help you move the needle, constantly looking for the missing piece of information, is kind of just distracting you from what you are actually here to create, or your own unique ideas, or your own perspective on a thing, or how you could do things differently. And I think that we are also in a kind of like, it's really frustrating where we're at right now, because I am talking to a lot of people who are saying things that used to work aren't working the way that they used to anymore.
Yes.
Which is really, really frustrating. And also, that means you get to do whatever the fuck you want.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the right way isn't working anyways, then maybe change it up and start running a fucking experiment and try something else. Because like, I mean, what do you have to lose?
Right.
You know, and that's where the actual creativity comes in. And that's where you can actually like approach things differently. And that's where you actually have the space to say, okay, this is what I want this to look like, or this is what I want to create for other people, or the change that I want to make, or the impact that I want to have, or the thing that I want to set straight. I'm going to approach this from a place of self-trust and creativity that I can bring that to life, and also approach the money-making piece from a place of creativity rather than just trying to follow the rules. Because I mean, I don't know. I have learned this lesson over and over and over again, that literally every single time that I ever find something where I'm like, aha, this is it. This is going to be the thing that is finally going to change everything. And finally, like, the money is going to start flowing in and everything's going to be easy. I'm like, oh, right. And yet again, it's actually more complicated than that. Great. I actually have to be more creative than that. I actually have to make it work for my unique circumstances. I actually have to like tap into what I think, or put my own spin on the thing, or take one part of it that works and like to completely forget all the rest of it because the rest of it is distracting me. Like, and I just so badly want to like stop this pattern that I see so many people get sucked into, where you're just on the search for that thing that's gonna like, you know, finally make it all make sense.
You know, I've seen the other side, right? Like, I've worked with folks who have really successful businesses, like financially successful, and like they've checked off all the things, right? And so they've checked off all the things. And I don't, for disclosure, for people who don't know, like I'm not a business coach, right? Like I do a lot of coaching around perfectionism and stress and anxiety. And that
turns out lots of us business owners struggle with those things.
Turns out, that there's a lot of that going on in this world.
Wait, entrepreneurs need your help? I don't know why they would ever need that. Yeah.
So like I've seen, right, I work with a lot of the people who are, because, also spoiler alert, people often don't hire me until they've got the funds to be like, okay, like I actually feel like I can now hire the person that can help me in the like, stress, emotional sort of nervous system side.
Yeah.
Which is totally fair, right? You're trying to make wise investments when you're getting things going. But yeah, I end up with the people who are, and I don't just work with entrepreneurs, like I'm also working with people with regular jobs, but a lot of the people who've checked all the check boxes, right? They've got the stable income. They've got the business that's working. They do know what levers to pull. And they're not, and guess what? Like nothing magically happened. It's not like all of those things happen and all of a sudden they're like, yay, now I can kick back and relax. No, because they have no idea how to not do anything other than just like sprint on the hamster wheel as fast as possible.
Yep. And by the way, for everybody who's looking at those people from the outside thinking, oh my gosh, those people just have it all together. They've figured it out. They just have it on autopilot. Everything's probably running like a well-oiled machine over there. All they have to do is just wake up and just stroll into their probably beautiful office and just, like breeze through their day. I think that both of us can confirm that that is not what's going on.
It's not what's going on. It's not what's going on unless people have really done some like deep inquiry and and they've been like confronting that concept like throughout the entire build. And I think that that's that's kind of the rub, is that there's not a finish line. You're not going to get to a point where all of a sudden you're like, the heavens open up and the angels come down and all the money flows and you're like, I'm done now and I feel great. Like,
right.
There's a lot more. There just continues to be complexity and things that happen and things that are interesting. And I guess and if you're not, what I want to say is if that's the vision you have, then the reality is going to be like a harsh slap in the face.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people are continuing to be like, wait, this is my reality. So that means there's something wrong with me.
Right.
Or this is my reality. And so that means that I'm doing something wrong. Or this is my reality. And so I must not be as capable as I thought I was.
Right.
Instead of, this is
it.
your reality. These are the things that you know that you want to be different. Is it possible to like have a little bit of acceptance of what reality is right now? Give yourself a little bit of those things that you want to be different. Actually live your fucking life. And like, know that whatever it is, like you're going to have to keep showing up to this and it is going to be work and it is going to be challenging. And so how can you like set it up in a way where you can like at least show up to it day in and day out in a way that doesn't feel like a total, just like you're getting the shit beat out of you every day.
Right.
And I think that like, we have to recognize that so much of the industry that, you're not a business coach, but surprise, you're on a business podcast. So you're in the business development industry with me right now. So much of this industry thrives on the blue sky promises. It thrives on it runs because of the fact that people are convinced that they're going to hit some sort of finish line, right?
Yep.
And it's reinforced at the top of every sales page that you see.
Yep.
Like, what if things get to be like this and you finally get to blah, 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 right? And I'll be honest with you, as I was thinking about being even more explicit about breaking that down, I was thinking, well, okay, then where does that leave people? And am I being dumb by being like, actually, like that's not how, because where does that leave me? Do I have something to offer? If I'm not hooking people on some kind of blue sky, like promise of like, everything gets to be different. And ultimately it's like, what I kind of come back around to is like, I know for a fact that if I'm witnessing that and I can see it so clearly, any fear that I have of the position that it would put me in to no longer participate in it, if I can manage to set that aside and just focus on creating something better, I'm going to be fucking fine. I'm going to be fine. And the reason I know that I'm going to be fine is because we so desperately need something better. There's just no way that if I really focus my energy on creating something that approaches things differently and gives people a different way of looking at things, I just can't, I'm not willing to accept that that would somehow fuck me over in any way, because I look around and I see the people who need it. And I'm like, I mean, this is my whole fucking job. My whole job is to witness what people need and try to create a solution for it. And
Right.
so anyways, all of this to say, it's like, I think that this kind of brings us back around to where we started this conversation, which is like, we have all of these things that are pulling us back to like, no, do things this way. Don't trust yourself in your own creativity. Don't have the real conversation. Don't write something just to write it. Don't write something just to connect with people or offer a different perspective. Write a thing because it's marketing.
Right.
Do a thing because it's in an industry where you can make money. Do a thing because it's smart and strategic and whatever for your business. And that ultimately, I think that we're just at this point right now where look around and look at all of the things that you're seeing around you and ask yourself how helpful it feels like it is to you, and ask yourself if you want to be one of those people, or if you want to be the person who's daring to do things a bit differently and creating to actually create something better and more beautiful and whatever. And like, I don't know where that leaves us. Like, I don't know. I can't make a guarantee that money is going to flow from that, because to be honest, that's some straight fucking bullshit too. That's like the whole, like the prosperity gospel of like fucking money goes to people who are like doing things the right way and are good people and whatever. Audrey,
if you really want to make a perfectionist totally lose their mind, just go down that rabbit hole.
Right.
Like,
so we can't make those guarantees, but what I can tell you is that, I don't know, at least the thing that you said you wanted to do when you decided to do the work that you chose to do, like, which I'm assuming was do something meaningful and something that matters to you and feel like you're having an impact on people and actually enjoy your work and have some sense of creative control and freedom, you could have that. And I mean, if the things that you're trying that are supposedly going to make you money are not making you money anyway, I don't know, maybe we give it a shot. Like, that's my whole thing, is I'm like, I'm not guaranteeing you that any of this stuff is going to work, but I can tell you that if you're not willing to even try it, you're going to have a damn hard time of like, you know, getting where you want to go.
Yeah. And I think it's the thing that keeps coming up for me around this conversation is just like getting real with what your risk tolerance is.
Yes.
Because I think that that is such a, that's just like such a real conversation right there. And when I say risk tolerance, that covers a lot of bases. Like, what is your financial risk tolerance, right? Because people are going to have all sorts of different numbers. They're going to have all sorts of different histories. Again, they're going to have all sorts of different income streams, or maybe they don't have all sorts of income streams. Maybe they have savings. Maybe they don't have savings. Maybe they have, you know, investors. Maybe they don't. That's going to look very different. What are people's like emotional risk tolerances? Because listen, this shit is not easy, especially if you are in the public eye, depending on what you're interested in creating, what you're interested in saying, how fired up that's going to get people, right? That can create a certain amount of, you know, social risk perhaps for people. These are all things that are real, right? There are all sorts of things that are real. You know, when there's that kind of conversations around like taking up space and being loud and all of that sort of stuff. Yes. And everything still comes with a consequence. Like, I think that that's the piece that I want to be really explicit about, because there is a lot of blue sky and there is a lot of, you know, sort of positive psychology, but I'm like, okay. And these, again, are concepts, and we also live in like a reality, and there is like, there are consequences to our actions, right? There are consequences to our actions. And so not everybody is going to receive us in a wonderful way. And some people receive us poorly. And that's going to be like, what is people's tolerances for that sort of thing? Cause I think that's I think that's totally real. I think it's worth thinking about that. And I think our people's willingness to be brave and try stuff out and be experimental and like stick their toes in the water and check things out and see how it goes. Like that's how change gets created too, or new ideas come about. Like nothing new ever got created, or nothing ever got shifted because people were like,
what's the way you're supposed to do this again? Let me follow the instruction. Like, you know, like on that same point of risk tolerance, like one of the things that I think about all the time is like, am I willing to, there are certain things that I have considered doing or trying or have done in the past because of the fact that there's a promise attached to it, that like, this is what everyone says you have to do. This is what everyone says works. And so, you know what? Being in business means you have to make money. That's the definition of being in business. So I'm willing to do it. And what I've started asking myself more and more is like, am I willing to take the risk of that not working because it's going to suck? And sometimes the answer is yes, I am. But I think that I think I've had to get myself more used to, rather than going into, because what I would do before is I would ask myself that question if it was my idea. So I want to try this. Well, am I willing to risk that potentially not working because it might not work? But then tried quote unquote best practice, you know, would be presented to me. And I would never ask myself that question. I would just think, okay, I have to do that because that's the thing that works. And if it doesn't work, it just means that I'm not doing it enough. Or I'm not doing it right or whatever. Right. But I never was asking myself, actually, there's a risk of that not working too. And am I willing to try that if it potentially isn't going to work? I would only ask myself that with my ideas.
Am I willing to risk it? Am I willing to put all of those questions? Right. Yeah, totally.
And so it's just interesting to now notice like where I perceive all of the risk is. And like, I perceive other people's ideas as a sure thing. And I perceive my ideas as risky. And it's not true. And like, how many times do I need to have that proven to me? How many fucking times does it need to become just so obvious through real world experience that is not how the world works? It is not how this works.
Yes.
And yet here I am convincing myself that every idea that I have is a risk and every idea that everybody else has is just a sure thing, that if only I was just a good enough fucking student that I could just do it right and just be disciplined enough.
And that's the thing. I'm with you in that camp. I'm totally with you in that camp, is that if I'm a good enough student of whatever philosophy or whatever practice, then it's going to work.
Right.
Because obviously everybody else seems to be doing it just fine. It seems to be working for them. But like, if I come up with something, then it's brand new and it's never been tested and like, it's risky and all. But yeah, I mean, that's, again, I think we're talking about that discernment is figuring out, is maybe putting the question mark right above everything.
Yeah. On that note of the, you know, everybody else's whatever, I just thought it would be, you know, helpful to throw out there in case anyone doesn't know this. Most businesses lose money. I don't know if anyone's aware of that, you know, because I feel like we have this.
Right. The definition of business is making money, but businesses lose a lot of it.
Yes. Like if you're not losing money, if you are not pouring money in and actually losing money, you are actually performing better than a lot of very large businesses out there. I like, not sure if you're aware, you know, and I don't think that we're not, because we're not told that. Like the image that we have is that like everyone has figured out how to do it except for us. And it's just not true. It's like, I think it's like I think it's around 60% of businesses are not making money. I was listening to the podcast, what's it called? The Dropout, which was the podcast about Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos.
Oh, yes.
And then they did a series while she was on trial.
Yeah.
For people who are listening who are not familiar with the story, which you probably are familiar with the story, Elizabeth Holmes was a CEO of a very large medical technology company that basically the entire thing was just smoke and mirrors, and she was just conning people into giving her huge amounts of money for investments and couldn't do any of the things that she said this business could do. And I was listening to it and I was just thinking about the hundreds of millions of dollars that this woman got these people to give her.
Yes.
This company was operating for a decade. And I'm listening to it and I'm like, you know what's cool? My business makes more money than Theranos ever made. That's cool. Like, but this is the thing that I don't think we realize, or we think about people, we put other people on this kind of like, we think about their story as totally different, where it's like these huge companies that are legit and whatever, and we don't know how to do that. And actually, like, I don't think people understand that really the idea that everyone has it figured out except for you is not only bullshit, but like, you can be an operational business that is a multi-million-dollar business and actually be losing money. And so where does that leave us then? Because like, if the goal is no longer to have the 6-figure business or have the 7-figure business or the whatever, then what the fuck is the goal? Okay, then how about we come back to that?
Yeah. Let's back it up about 50 million steps.
Right. It's like, anyways, I'm just going on this like tirade at this point, but like, it just blows my mind because I'm like, wow, we're so confused.
Yeah. And why wouldn't we be?
Exactly. We're confused because of the kinds of conversations that are being had in, you know, and unfortunately in the places where we're going to look for help, where we're going to seek some sort of help me see that I'm not as alone, give me some kind of answer to move me forward. And I just feel like in a lot of those places where we're looking for that, we're getting something that's actually sucking us further into this spiral and distracting us more from what we actually want to create. And for most business owners want to have a good fucking time. That's what I've realized. Most business owners decided to go into business for themselves because they wanted to have a flexible fucking schedule. That's what most people wanted when they decided to go into business for themselves. They wanted like to be able to choose when they work, to have some sort of like creative control over their work, to do something meaningful, maybe express their creativity. And I just am like, okay, let's come back to that and the reality of that, because you take a few steps in to figure out how to make it happen. And the next thing you know, it's like so many of us have lost sight of all of the reasons why we even came here and are now sucked into this machine of like, this is how you do business that recreates all of the things that we hated about our jobs.
Yeah. It just becomes more business as usual, but with just a different face on it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I hope that we can have different kinds of conversations here, and probably we're going to often miss the mark. That's fine too. We're going to figure it out together, but at least there will be some nuance and fucking context.